Welcome to the Risk and Repeat podcast, episode number 226. I'm Rob Wright, Security News Director at TechTarget, and I am here with Senior Security News Writer Alex Kalafi. Alex, welcome.
Thanks, Rob.
How are you doing on this fine Wednesday, March the 13th, 2024?
I'm good. Security's in a weird spot right now. A lot of entities who you're like, oh, they're not going to get breached like this. They're getting breached like that. And today we're talking about the latest example, I suppose.
Yeah. So we are going to discuss Ivanti and CISA because there's a lot going on there, quite a lot. There is we are in, I guess, the third month now of an ongoing sort of situation that stems from a couple of 0 days. But the big news, which was first reported by The Record, kudos to them, was that CISA was, well, I don't know. So we can get into kind of the terminology. Two of CISA's systems they discovered were breached through these Ivanti 0 days. So I don't know if you would term this as like a full breach of CISA, but certainly they had two systems compromised as a result of a couple of Ivanti 0 days. Alex, you wrote the story. Can you take us into the situation?
Yeah, so Ivanti, which is a big IT software type vendor, like they do some supply chain management, some security, some endpoint management. They do a little of everything. They're not like just a security vendor or just whatever. So they disclosed 2 0 days, January 10th, that were being hit by a Chinese nation state actor. One of them is an authentication bypass flaw. The other is a command injection one. They can get chained together and cause, remote code execution. It took a few weeks for it to get patched, both of those to get patched. And when the patch finally came out at like the very tail end of January, like 3 weeks later or something, there was a third 0 day, which they found, which was a server-side request forgery flaw.
Yep.
And although it just seemed like at first it was like nation-state activity, over the following weeks, it sort of turned into mass exploitation. I think the first estimate we got was like 1,700 instances were compromised. Then if like at the end of January, then that went up to around 2,000 in February. And I haven't heard what the estimates are since then, but it sounds like it's a couple to a few thousand folks have gotten hit by this in some way, shape, or form.
Or that there's at least evidence of tampering of the Ivanti instances. So again, not clear if it's a full-blown breach in all those cases, if they've gotten in and really caused a lot of problems. It could just be some mild hacking, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So yeah, but a lot of Ivanti Connect Secure and Ivanti Policy Secure instances that were compromised. So there you go.
Yes, those were the two softwares that were affected. And then The Record earlier this month, as you said, they reported that folks got into CISA, the U.S. Cyber Agency. They confirmed it like pretty much immediately. They said that CISA identified activity indicating the exploitation of vulnerabilities in Ivanti products the agency uses. They didn't specify which Ivanti products, but to me, the implication is that it's related to these flaws because later on in the statement that they gave us and some other folks, they said, we strongly urge all organizations to review our latest Ivanti advisory and take the steps outlined in it to protect their systems. So they're not saying these are the vulnerabilities that hit us outright, but they are saying we got hit in some Ivanti related context. And by the way, you should look at this advisory. And that sort of came on the heels of on February 29th, when CISA provided new technical details about the vulnerabilities, as they do in their security advisories, some indicators of compromise. But then they also questioned how effective that their internal and external, Ivanti's internal and external integrity checker tool was. It's sort of something that's built into these products and a lot of others. It's a thing that sort of gives signs of compromise or tampering or what have you.
Right.
CISA said that it and its international partners determined that threat actors um, could or have deceived the tool, and that the advisory said that there were instances where the tool failed to detect compromise, and then right after, Ivanti uh, came out and said this hasn't been tested in the wild. And then just before CISA's advisory came out, Ivanti released a new version of the tool that CISA did end up backing in the days following.
We
So
think.
well, it's like I think they still recommended people use it, if I remember right.
Yes. Yeah. They had
yeah.
Yeah, they had recommended using the latest, I guess, integrity checker tool, ICT. But it's one of many questions around the situation that's not totally clear, and we'll get into it in a minute. But I think big picture, we should start with, CISA got hacked. It doesn't look like it was bad. They said 2 systems. I think the record had some details about which specific systems were accessed. So a little bit more information there. And I encourage everyone listening to read that story. It's a great scoop by those guys. But yeah, it's certainly, regardless of the damage or scope of the attack, it's a little unnerving. How did you feel, Alex, when you read the news, when that popped up late Friday last week?
No, I don't think this is the first time that CISA has had any sort of vague breach, something, or at least there's been enough vague government compromises where it's feasible that CISA could have been included in those. So it's not like this might be the first time ever, but this is the first time I remember where the agency confirmed some sort of breach. And I don't know. It seems like it was limited to 2 systems. It seemed like they responded quickly. They confirmed it as soon as the information got out there. Although it was about a month ago, so I guess they could have been more transparent, but whatever. I guess it makes you always nervous to see that the entities that are supposed to protect you getting got in some small way.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like I don't think any less of CISA, at least based on what we know so far. It's like, oh, they got affected by this. They put out a good advisory. They did disclose when someone found out, I guess.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. It's just I don't have any strong negative or positive feelings other than, man, it never feels good to see that. I guess it's just that's the extent of my opinion. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. And I would add that if you're going to have something like this happen, having it happen through 2 0-day vulnerabilities, apparently not confirmed, but strongly suggested, having it happen through 2 0 days that at the time did not have patches, that had some issues with the mitigation recommendations that were being provided by the vendor, which we'll get into in just a sec.
Mhm.
and that were exploited by a Chinese nation state actor. And I kind of understand it, I get it. It's not like we should just say, well, those things are going to happen, because you obviously want your federal agencies, especially your US cybersecurity agencies, to do better and to be better defended. But at the same time, I can certainly understand why something like this would happen. So it was just a shock, though, to read that. And the thing that really stood out to me was I was kind of not kicking myself, but I kind of like a head slap type moment for me, because one of the things that really was bizarre to me was, you had mentioned the advisory that they put out on February 29th.
Mhm.
That advisory to me was a little odd, because
Okay.
one of the things they said in there was that they had reviewed a lot of incidents involving these, exploitation of these vulnerabilities, and that they had conducted studies, independent studies in a lab to figure out how the ICT was not working sufficiently. It was not sufficiently detecting compromises on devices. And they had also found out that, like, even when you reboot these devices, and an attacker could maintain persistent access to the device, which is not great. That's and so they put out this advisory. At the time, I'm thinking, why did they? I mean, I know these are two pretty big vulnerabilities, but I don't recall seeing a lot of from CISA independent lab testing. So I thought that was a little unusual, and I just kind of assumed in the back of my head, I was like, well, there must have been some federal agencies hit as a result of this, as Chinese nation state threat groups or want to do. They like to get inside the U.S. government and see what's going on, collect a lot of data, et cetera, et cetera. I never expected that CISA itself was going to be one of the agencies that was affected, or the agency that was. We don't know how many organizations
Sure.
might have been affected. So that was surprising to me. And I think this whole situation now kind of, it's confusing to me to understand what exactly is going on with this ICT, because we started out back in January. Ivanti said, run this ICT, run the internal ICT. They found out soon after that, I think via third-party researchers, that, hey, you can bypass the internal integrity checker. And so Ivanti comes back and says, well, we've updated it. Now we have an external checker, an external ICT. So use this one. And so people start using that one, and they recommend using, I think at the time they had recommended using both, which didn't make a lot of sense to me, but whatever. And then CISA comes out on the 29th and says, actually, there's shortcomings with this latest external one too. And where the confusion really comes in is as you mentioned, I think 2 days, I think on February 27th, Ivanti had put out a blog post saying, we've got a new updated external ICT to help detect compromises.
Mm-hmm.
And in that CISA advisory on the 29th, CISA says it very clearly, I might add, that they say, quote, during multiple incident response engagements associated with this activity, CISA identified that Ivanti's internal and previous external ICT failed to detect compromise, the advisory said. In addition, CISA has conducted independent research in a lab environment validating that the Ivanti ICT is not sufficient to detect compromise, and that a cyber threat actor may be able to gain root level persistence despite issuing factory resets. Emphasis there, me, obviously. And I think at one point in the article, or sorry, in the advisory, they stressed that, there was a part of that advisory where they said, we strongly urge all organizations to basically review, like consider the risk of running these products.
Mm-hmm.
Like strong, and they like in a bolded section of the statement. So that to me, I was confused. I read that and I said, oh, well, obviously they're referring to the previous one, but maybe not, because there's multiple references to the ICT, external ICT, not working sufficiently, not sufficient to detect compromised devices. And so I said, well, that's not clear. So, Ariel wrote that story, our colleague, Ariel Waldman, security reporter here at Tech Target. And we hit up CISA. We hit up Ivanti. We know that Ivanti put out this blog post and said that, hey, this hasn't been tested in a lab, and this is, we encourage people to run the latest external ICT, and so do the other partners. To me, that wasn't clear. I don't know how you feel about it reading the advisory, but even though there is that word previous in that one sentence in that advisory, I kind of thought, well, it's not clear. And if it's not clear and they're not clarifying it and they're not coming out and saying, yes, this latest ICT that was released on the 27th sufficiently detects compromise on these devices, well, then I don't know what we should be thinking. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to believe. If they can't clarify that, whoever, CISA, Ivanti, whatever, I think that creates real confusion. And I don't know why, now we're almost 2 weeks, we're 2 weeks out from when that went up, and we still haven't got, full clarity on what the deal is. And that's concerning to me. So I don't know how you read that when you saw it or as you were working on this latest story, but to me, it wasn't entirely clear. And I think that's a big problem.
Yeah. I think this is, I was sort of hearing you talk, I was looking at my story and I was sort of taking stock of like, what do we know and what do we don't? And there's one thing that I think we haven't really discussed that I think colors a lot of this. And it's the first 4 words of CISA's statement, which is about a month ago. So about a month ago, CISA identified activity, meaning that it happened at least a month ago, which means that we know for a fact that the advisory was at least partially created and was definitely published in a post CISA knowing that they were compromised and Ivanti knowing that they were compromised, because there's no way Ivanti doesn't know that this happened to CISA. Even if they didn't say that, we can basically call that a fact. So those are the 2 things we know.
Yeah.
So although what you were talking about over the last few minutes was speculation, it's still interesting to think about, like, did the tool fail CISA, right? Is the new tool not sufficient? Does Ivanti know that the tool failed CISA, but because CISA's not talking about the attack, Ivanti can straight up lie? I don't know. And I'm not saying they did. I wouldn't dare accuse them of that unless we had evidence, but it's interesting to say that, like, yes, what you're talking about is speculation, but given the 2 facts we know, that Ivanti, or the one fact we know, that all the CISA stuff happened after that they were breached, and the probable fact that Ivanti knows that CISA got breached, makes the speculation that you're doing a lot more interesting than it would have been otherwise. So, do I have like an exact guess or prediction about what's going on here? No. But I do think that the speculation you're doing is very valuable given the limited facts we do know about the case.
Yeah, I think it's I think you're right. I mean, this obviously, per the statement, this happened not recently. It happened a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it happened before the latest ICT was released. So that's good. But at the same time, so it like you said, it certainly seems as though the ICT did not work in
Mm-hmm.
this incident with CISA, and that's kind of how they came on to, oh, there's shortcomings here. And I'll just point out that this happened a couple times. So I think it was on January 19th, CISA issued an emergency directive to all the federal, agencies to mitigate these 0 days, I think within like 3 days. I think but January 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
And on January 31st, they had put out the advisory, saying, hey, we've detected threat actors subverting there's evidence of threat actors bypassing or subverting this integrity checker tool. And then the same day they put out a supplement saying, this is another sort of indication that CISA and Ivanti are not quite on the same page. CISA put out an advisory that ordered all federal agencies to, quote, disconnect all instances of Ivanti
Mm-hmm.
Connect Secure and Ivanti Policy Secure Solutions products from agency networks by February 2nd. Now there's some, additional caveats there. You got to do X, Y, and Z before you restore them. So it's not saying, rip these out and never restore, never connect them again or use them again. But that was a major sticking point in that blog post from Ivanti on February 27th regarding the new integrity checker tool, the latest version,
Mm-hmm.
and which they updated on the 29th in response to CISA's advisory saying that the ICTs don't really work. And they said, this I think at one point in that blog post they said, well, the media has misinterpreted what CISA said about disconnecting and so on and so forth. So take the media and all that stuff out of it, it still doesn't seem like they're totally aligned on what's going on here. Because here's the thing, when we went to Ivanti and we asked very clearly,
Mm-hmm.
was this latest ICT developed in response to what CISA found in its incident testing? They didn't answer. So how do we know if the latest ICT actually does work and solves the issues that CISA had outlined in that February 29th post? We don't. We can assume, and you can go back to that part in, that line about internal and previous external ICTs were not sufficiently detecting compromise, et cetera, but you don't really know. And so if I'm an organization out there, I guess this is the big question. Alex, let's say you're a CISO.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? I mean, you've patched, right? You've done all the
Yeah.
threat hunting. You've looked for signs of compromise. What, I don't know, do you feel confident?
What I would probably do, and I'm guessing a lot of other folks have probably done the same two-step process, is one, I would probably go to Reddit for r/Ivanti and see what people are saying, um, and see how people feel about it.
Right.
And then two, I would probably, if this was a big enough company, I guess I would probably reach out to CISA and be like, hey, should I trust this? Like, I see what you're writing here, but talk straight to me. What should I
Yeah.
be doing here?
Yeah.
Because CISA wants people to talk to them.
Yep.
So I would talk to them.
Yeah.
And if they don't talk back, that potentially would reflect poorly on them.
So this is the thing. I'm glad you mentioned this, and I think this is the overall one of the overall takeaways or conundrums here. There's obviously a lot of confusion. It's never a good thing when, your US, your government cybersecurity agency gets pwned. 0 days are bad, et cetera, et cetera. But CISA is in a position here that I don't envy, because you don't want to come out and say flatly, guys, you shouldn't run this. You shouldn't have these products online. They're too big a risk. They've got to be very careful about how they go about this. But at the same time, I don't know. There is enough wiggle room and enough sort of vague language in here. Again, going back to that February 29th advisory that they put out, that was like, bolded. I mean, they're saying like strongly consider the risk, or whatever the exact words were. I mean, to me, that spoke to major urgency. Major urgency. And it was part of the reason that as I was reading through that, I'm like, hey, it's not totally clear to me that this latest external ICT does solve everything, and that everything's in the clear, because I feel like they'd probably emphasize that a little more, and they would probably say, hey, here's a link to that latest tool, and here's the blog post that Ivanti published 2 days ago, and we strongly bolded, urge you to run this immediately because this will detect compromise. They didn't do that. So there's enough sort of vagueness to all of this that I guess if you're an enterprise out there, like, you don't totally, it's not totally clear what you should be doing. You don't totally know. And I don't think CISA or any federal agency wants to be in the position of saying, like, you can't use this product, or this product is too big of a risk. It's too much of a security risk at this time. But at the same time, I don't know how many organizations. I mean, you mentioned the numbers of compromised devices. So like, how many enterprises out there right now don't really understand the full breadth of the threat vector here, the attacks going on, the risk this is posing. There may be some organizations out there that haven't read any of this stuff, which is remarkable to me. But particularly the ones that have seen the alerts and the advisories, I would love to talk to a few of them and find out, like, hey, what was your takeaway reading this? Did you feel like you needed to disconnect these things? Did you disconnect these things? Did you say, this is too big of a risk, we're turning these off, or all good, we're just going to run the latest external ICT and clearly we're okay? I don't know, but it is a great point by you. It's just not totally clear. You would love to be able to call someone at CISA and just get a straight answer, like, hey, I wouldn't do this, or I would. And that's kind of where we're at. Again, this is we're in the third month of this thing. The patches are out there, but patches don't mean anything if you can just, you apply the patch and you reboot the system, but they've maintained persistence. The attackers are still there. You did a factory reset, and that's not great. And again, I know Ivanti saying this hasn't been tested in the wild or whatever. This is just lab testing. I think it's important, and who knows, this could be going on as we speak, as we pod. I hope the two of them, the two parties, are trying to get on the same page about this, because I don't think they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to give clear and concise messaging and recommendations to the companies out there that are using this stuff. So hopefully that happens, but I don't know. I mean, it's been 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's been 2 weeks, and we don't really have the clarity that I think the users and the customers need and deserve.
Yeah.
Need and deserve. So we'll see. Well, Alex, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me about this. Obviously, it's a thorny, messy, confusing situation with a lot of dates and moving parts, and who knows, we may pot about this again down the road as we get more clarity on the situation.
Yeah.
Not holding my breath, but yeah, I appreciate the help.
No problem. But I guess what I'll say is, what else is new?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess it's not that unusual.
Oh,
So,
0 day that heavily compromises a mid-size to large vendor, and gives everyone headache for 4 to 6 weeks. Like,
yeah,
how unusual.
yeah, that's true.
But yeah, no, it's always fun, Rob.
Yeah, it's great for us, I suppose. Fun in air quotes. Right. We'll see where this goes, but thanks as usual, Alex,
Yep.
for your help on this. And
Thank
thank
you.
you to the readers and listeners of Tech Target and the Risk and Repeat podcast. I'm Rob Wright, and we'll see you later.